Hi, everybody. This is Cindy Kennedy, and you are listening to another episode of Living with Lyme. And we're excited today to have Chris Marano with us, who is an herbalist up here in the Pioneer Valley. And his extreme experience is going to prove very, very helpful for a lot of the people listening because it is an alternative. It's an alternative to typical therapeutics that we use with Lyme disease, associated issues such as adrenal dysfunction. And I'm very excited. He's also an educator. He does educate up at UMass and Amherst on herbalism. So I would love to introduce to you Chris Marano.
Hi.
And hello, and tell us more about you, because there's a lot about you.
Yeah. So you want me to just start with like
Tell us about you. Yeah.
what the titles are?
Sure. Sure. What does all
So
these letters mean?
so my name's Chris Marano. I'm an herbalist, and I'm a professional herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild. That's what that RH parentheses AHG means. That's registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild. I'm considered a clinical herbalist. It depends on what I'm doing. If I'm working with folk in a health practitioner way, I'm a clinical herbalist. Within my own little town, I'm considered the community herbalist, which means, you might get paid in eggs or something like that,
Well, you know what? We're really looking for organic eggs these days. So I'm
It's
hoping
true.
that's what you get.
In Wendell, it is true, we do. I also teach, so I'm an educating herbalist. I have a couple of companies. What I've been for the longest is Clear Path Herbals, which is an umbrella that under which is a lot of things. So there's me as practitioner, and now I have a couple of other people on staff to help because there's too many people coming in. And there's me as educator of the owner operator of Clear Path School of Herbal Medicine. That's been for about 20 years, teaching classes, everything from self-interest and self-health all the way up to I want to do this. I want to do this for my community. And then there's the rest is product making. So the herbs are out there, and you can get them in different forms: pills, powders, tinctures, raw to make tea, and the rest of it, or they just are buried somewhere in supplements somehow. And a lot of we herbalists who started up in the renaissance of it all, we make a lot of our own products because they're all around us and we can grow them, and we have a network throughout the country to be able to trade and sell back and forth and make products that enable us to then make practically an infinite number of blends in order to help people in specific ways.
So that's good. I mean, that sounds individualized.
It's individualized. And then, of course, as you do this for a long time, you begin to see there are certain things that are more generalized. So there are certain formulas that become like stock formulas for the general person, like pain relief or sleep support or antiviral formula. And then if the person is coming to you for help, sometimes you can just work off that and say, well, your specific need is this here, but I'll just tweak it a little bit. But other times, as in with Lyme, there's certain parts that need to be totally individualized because of what happens with all the chronic symptoms that can happen with that.
Let's go back. What enticed you to become an herbalist? Where did this come from?
It's a long and winding road, convoluted. I grew up in the city, right outside New York City in New Jersey, and I always liked nature, but it was few and far between: cracks of sidewalks, cemeteries, and vacant lots, and all that. And always had an interest in science and nature. And then I went to Columbia University in New York City, and I was in the pre-med program, so I was getting all of that training, and realized how much I did not like that path. At the time it was because, I didn't like the students around me and how they were trying to just pummel you. But I still liked health. And I slip on cosmic banana peels, when you're like going along and suddenly something comes in your path and you're like, you're doing it. So I slipped into an Eastern philosophy religion program at Columbia, and then from there I slipped into a Buddhist master, who I wound up becoming his like right hand man for years, writing his books and running a lot of his classes, and Chinese. And there I started learning a lot about Chinese health and Chinese medicine, because Chinese medicine is really part of the Chinese way of looking at everything. So I was learning it inside out through this more monastic spiritual way rather than an acupuncture school. Um, After college, I was searching. I got a bug somehow. I don't know how this happened, but somehow I wanted to learn about herbs. There's hardly anything out there. A couple of books at the time. I went traveling around the country looking for an herb school and couldn't find one that was fitting what I was trying to do. There was hardly any. So I gave that up and I went into teaching high school science, uh, environmental studies, anatomy, physiology in the high school level, and then really dove into the Chinese stuff. And then I slipped on another peel into a Native American Cherokee community along the banks of the Delaware River up in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area where I was living. And I started learning a lot about Native American health and medicine and ceremony. And it turns out that the guy who was teaching there was one of the foremost herbalists in the country, David Winston. And then I said, okay, this is the time. It wasn't time then, it's time now. And then I started learning formally, and and then all of that came together, and I resigned from teaching and moved up to Massachusetts to be closer to my son. Wound up in the woods in northwestern central Mass in Wendell, and I just invented the practice, and then did everything. You know, the product making. We have gardens, we grow, we go wild crafting. This whole school that I teach, and then I teach a class at UMass for the last 15 years. And then the practitioner, really helping people out. We had a walk-in clinic at Acadia Herbals in Northampton until she closed her doors. But we're always working on something, either building gardens or making medicines more available, or making it more awareness for people.
Do you think it's necessary to live kind of in a more rural area where you are to be welcomed as an herbalist versus if you were in a big city with all kinds of, research going on and
Yeah,
yeah. So
that's
what's
a
the answer to that one?
it's a really good question, and the answer is changing uh, fairly rapidly, because things are changing. So it's really, I see the change that has happened just in the last 5 years, just in the last 6 months with COVID. And people are just looking around and saying what's out there, and they're looking at the climate change and all of it. So we're in a special time right now. However, what you're also saying is true. You know, I happen to live in an area that's um, like community CSAs started right outside our door. We have a lot of colleges here and a lot of people back to earth, back to land, but there could be other rural places that are not into that. You know, I've also been out in central rural New York State where they didn't want to know anything about herbalists. So there's something about the coming together of alternative thinking that Western Mass and Vermont is kind of known for. Um, However, you're in the more central Mass Worcester area, right?
I'm Western Mass outside of
Oh,
Springfield.
you're outside Springfield on the other
Hmm.
side, right? The central, how we got in touch was with an organization in the Worcester area, and I should tell you,
Exactly.
15, 20 years ago when I was starting, Worcester was just like, what's an herbalist? And now that's not true anymore. Things are changing, and there's people reaching out for help because they're either falling between the cracks as their symptoms are, or the medicines aren't working well for them. You know, sometimes the medicines work for people, a lot of times they don't, or there's a lot of adverse side effects that it's not worth it to them. You know, there's a million reasons.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so they are reaching out. They're saying, well, if not this, then what about that? And
Right, right. It's hard. Some people just don't have an open mind. Their their philosophy, their thinking, what they grew up with was you go to the doctor, you listen to what the doctor says, and you
right,
take the medication. And in my background, I still have vivid memories of women saying to me, "Just give me something. I don't have time. I don't have time
right,
for this. Just give me something. Write a prescription and give me something." And
yeah,
now, in the functional health space, where I'm an alternative, it's very different.
yeah,
And you have to educate these people. You have
right,
to have them understand why they're an active part of their health journey. You know, if without them, without their knowledge or learning, gaining that information and really following through, it's not going to get better. So you can't bring a horse to water and force them to drink. So you can't take somebody who doesn't want to even acknowledge an herbal program and say to them, this is what you have to do, knowing very well that the
right,
herbs are going to sit on the counter, they're never going to use it.
right.
You know, people have to buy in, but they have to learn. They have to learn
Definitely.
that research that proves that pill A works is because pill A was researched by a big pharmaceutical company who had all the medication, I'm sorry, all the money to do this type of research.
Right.
And, you know, no one's going to spend time looking at Japanese knotweed and proving unless that was picked up by a big pharmaceutical company. And it's not going to happen. It's not going to
Right.
happen. You follow the money trail. I'm
Oh yeah.
getting into a tirade. I better stop myself. Oh, whoa, 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 I'm going to get in a tirade. So what kind of general issues do you see? We're going to talk a little bit about Lyme disease in a moment, but in
Okay.
general, what's your biggest need? What do people come to you for?
Well, just to backtrack what you said, I consider myself first and foremost an educator. As a practitioner, I see myself much more as an educator, and I I am immediately in letting people know that the only person that's with them 24/7 is themselves, and that if they really want to get better, then they have to understand how the human body works, and it's not that hard to understand in order to be able to help yourself. And then you really have to pay attention to the areas of nutrition. It's huge, and not just the foods, but when you eat, how you eat, all of it. And then also sleep, you know, and then lifestyle behaviors, which is anything you're not putting into your mouth, you know, your work, your play, your stress, your relationships, all of that, they come into making us who we are. And this is how the body works. And I'm able to see how the body works from the Western perspective, traditional herbal, modern, allopathic, conventional, Chinese, and native. So I got these different lenses to say to people, if you really want to get better, this is what's going on down deep to make things change. Of course, there are certain things you have to fight, you know, like there are things to fight viruses, things to fight bacteria and the rest, but most of it then is how to help the person come back on track. So what I see most in a not health related way, I guess because of my reputation and all that, people are coming to me. The biggest common denominator is I want to take hold of my health, and I want to either stay well or get better. And people always say there's places to improve, and I want to understand what's going on because I don't want to go on these medicines, or I want to come off these medicines, or whatever the reason is. So there's that, right? And that's where I feel I'm giving them the tools, and I say, and here are the herbs that would help you along this way, and that will change. If you change, it will change along with you, because certain things will fall away and other things will rise up, and then it's an ongoing process. I think we call it life, you know, and it's lifespan, and that's what happens. And then we get hit by blindsided things, or there's the unfoldment of our DNA, or there's these sicknesses that come, and it all ends up the same after 90 to 100 years, but we want to live as well and gracefully as we can throughout. So
Right, right. You know,
give,
my big thing is explaining toxins. Do
yeah.
you talk about toxins?
Oh yeah. I talk about toxins from all angles, as you must, it's in the air, it's in the water, it's in the food, uh, it's in behaviors. We can talk about toxins on lots of levels. And then also there's the what not to do. What not to put into you. And then there's also what to put into you in order to keep things clean and flushed. And that's a huge part of the protocol for Lyme. Because if you don't do that and you're really hitting these organisms hard, you're going to experience those Herxheimer reactions, which is just the buildup and an overload of toxins from the massive die-off. But before all that, what you were saying earlier, how only 3% of the population is considered to be healthy in the United States. Well, I would say that the other 97% have toxic blood and lymph. They're battling a lot of stuff in them that if it wasn't there, everything would work better and they wouldn't get sick as often, and they would be able to fend things off easier. Not foolproof, not 100%, but a lot better than where they are right now.
Right,
So,
right. And the chronicity of issues are actually leaking right into the children. Are you
oh, yeah.
finding that as well?
Oh yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, and to come full circle, they answer your question, like what I see to be the most, whether they even know it or not, is nervous system and burnout kind of tied together. So that would fall under the category of adrenal health, or we could just say deep core vitality, endocrine health. And then the nervous system is part and parcel of that. Plus, it's also having to live in this situation, right? It's like it has a lot to do with our mental emotional place. It has a lot to do with our cognitive place. For Lyme people, it has a lot to do with the neurological place. And there's people in chronic pain. There's people with chronic sleep issues. And all of that is tying in with the nervous system. So that's what I see the most, coupled with where it's very hard in the United States to live a sustainable lifestyle. We're all being asked to do way too much. We're working way harder than any indigenous population ever did. Like even if, COVID notwithstanding and people being out of work, in the old days, they said a full work week was 40 hours, and I hardly know anybody who works 40 hours. Most people are working close to double that if you really start adding up the numbers, you
It's
know.
interesting that you say that because my husband, his company in Hartford, sent everybody home and they've kept everyone home. And although people are finding they actually like it where they didn't think they would like being at home, they're also finding it harder to shut things down.
Mhm.
So when you work somewhere and you shut your
Yes.
computer off, right, and then you get in your car and you
Mm.
drive home, you shut it down. But when the computer is at home and you think of something and then there's an email, it's the access. Plus these young parents with these children at home, and you're having to make sure that they're getting their learning needs met.
Yes.
And their behaviors are crazy and they're fighting more. You don't even have a break from them. it's this is a very this is a situation of
Mhm.
dire need to get people's stress levels down,
Yeah.
because educating people about stress has to do with talking directly about adrenal glands, your cortisol levels,
Hmm.
your fight or flight. When you're in
Hmm.
fight or flight because the tiger's chasing you because you're so stressed out, you're not going to make your melatonin. So you're not going to sleep well. Then you're not going to detoxify well. It's a vicious cycle. And
Yeah.
when you're constantly stimulated like that, you're not going to digest your food well.
It's true enough.
So, and then, you've got decreased absorption, and then now you've got all of this low production of hydrochloric acid, and then you've got all kinds of things going on with your bile, and then you're getting a whole intestinal dysbiosis.
Yeah.
it's imperative, and people just kind of run on, you know, coffee and just that constant feeling, and they wonder why it affects their health. It's true. I mean, stress is probably one of the biggest killers that we have.
It's the most it's the common denominator for, or the linchpin, if you want to call it, for most of what's going on. And
It,
and it goes deep and it goes wide, and it's on so many levels, from personal trauma to just the ongoing, what do you want to call it, the atmosphere of the situation, to ancestral lines. It's just, you keep on looking at it, and if you were able to see them as layers, you would say, oh, we have so much we're carrying.
right,
And
right. So specializing, you know, in terms of certain disorders and when people come to you, let's start with sleep. What is helpful for sleep?
we're asking herbally, right? You want,
We're
besides
herbally, yes.
pure herbally.
Yeah, we're just going to
So
go to the herbs.
okay, so there are what we would call calmative, sedative, nervine herbs, that some of them are powerful enough that if you were to take them during the daytime, you might say you don't operate heavy machinery and you might get a little drowsy. But the majority of them, when you're approaching sleep, and you and your body knows it kind of wants to go there, then an herb that would feel more like taking the edge off and being more of an anti-anxiety in the daytime, it can become a sleep aid at night, because that's the direction we're going in. So one of the famous ones is valerian root. Smells like dirty socks. It's you probably smelled it in your day, right? If
Oh, we had it once and we were trying to make tea out of it. It just was rough. It was rough. Actually, I remember my daughter going like this. She was holding her nose and
Yeah,
drinking the tea because she knew it was going to work.
yeah. And it's also, if you make it fresh versus dry, it's not as smelly and the rest of it. But there's about 10 to 15% of the population that have an opposite reaction to it, and they
Oh,
get more jittery. So because of that, I don't put that in my generalized sleep support formula. If somebody says valerian works really well for me, then I'll just spike it with valerian to make it more special for them. But hops, which is beer, that's a sedative. um, California poppy. It's in the poppy family, but not in the poppy genus, and it's legal, and you're allowed to grow it in your gardens and make medicine from it without having somebody knock on your door and say you're not allowed to do that.
because yeah, you're not making opium.
Right? It's not the opium poppy. But it does have properties because the medicine's kind of running through the whole family of plants. Um, Skullcap is another. Our native skullcap, they call it Mad Dog skullcap, and it's another good one to take the edge off. Passion flower is another. It's a beautiful plant native to this country, grows more south of here along the Appalachians and the Smokies. Puts out, after you get off this, Google passion flower and go to images and just be blown away by the flowers.
Wow.
They're so
Wow.
beautiful. They look like it should be growing in Hawaii, which it does, but it's a different
Okay.
species.
Do you have to blend this all together or just like
Well,
I
the
worry
truth
about?
is each one of those on their own does a good job, but they might be working at a different angle, right? And so it's nice to blend at least a couple of them together in order to help. And everything I just mentioned was just like you asked the question, straight up sleep, right? So then, as an herbalist and a practitioner, I'm going to ask the person, so tell me more about this. Why trouble sleeping? Do you have trouble falling asleep? Do you fall asleep right away but wake up 3 hours later or 5 hours later? How do you wake up? Do you wake up in a sweat and the sheet's all twisted and agitated? Or do you wake up like ping, and then you're staring at the ceiling and you don't know why you're awake, and then you're just twiddling your thumbs for the next 2 hours? Do you wake up because you're having bad dreams? Do you wake up, all these different reasons? Is it hard for you to fall asleep or stay asleep because of pain? because your mind won't stop running in circles. So all of those give me hints for the individual to be able to throw things in from the side that might not necessarily be a straight up sleep herb. It might be a pain reliever instead, to say, oh, I'm taking the edge off the pain so you can drop. Like CBD
Yeah.
does that. If people have hurt joints, they've even said that drinking that tart cherry juice
Hmm.
that people take, especially if they're not, or if they're experiencing gout, tart cherry juice has this globally body-wide anti-inflammatory effect. When my father was alive, he was doing it for something else, and then he wound up sleeping through the whole night, because as you get older and your muscles start to atrophy a little bit in the elder years, and you're leaning on your body, it starts to ache just because your body is resting against the mattress, and he just started sleeping better because it was taking the edge off.
Well, that's so good, because I also heard that it increases melatonin production.
Mhm.
So that's
Nice,
good.
nice little
So
side benefit.
it is. It is. Now, what do you say to people who say, I can get blends of this in pill form or capsule form or whatnot? What do you say? What is the benefit of seeking help primarily right from the herbalist themselves?
Um, for what I just said right there, if it's not like, I have this stock formula, sleep support, but it doesn't have valerian in it.
Mm-hmm.
A nice conversation with a healthcare practitioner, an herbalist, for, let's say, even a half an hour, I run them through a series of questions. I get to learn a lot, you know. I get to learn if they eat right before bedtime, like their bowl of ice cream, and then they wonder why they're waking up 3 hours later with their sheets twisted and all sweaty and stuff, because you just agitated your liver, right? So you ask a few questions, and now suddenly this herbal formula is not really at all like that sleep support formula. Is there pain? Is there just anger that the person's not releasing? Is there a blood pressure issue? And then, so there's that. And then from the product itself, okay, so I'm in a kind of a semi-unique situation, because there are herbalists out there that don't really have their own apothecary. Maybe they live in the city. Maybe they're herbalists that are living in the middle of Boston or something. It's like, where's their garden, right? So they're trusting the products that are made by other people. Uh, I'm kind of semi-unique in that I started quite a while ago, and I really was deeply enamored of and in love with the plants and the process of the alchemy of turning them into tinctures. I became very much a fan of the tinctures because they gave the best ability to extract the largest full amount out of the plant, and taking a broad spectrum, not isolating any one thing, and also allowing for preservation for a long time. You don't have to worry about spoilage. It's alcohol mixed with water. And the third thing is, it's super convenient for the person, because if you've ever been to a Chinese herbalist or a Chinese doctor, they send you with a prescription that you can't read, and they have this big piece of paper, and they start throwing all these herbs in there with instructions that's a page and a half long that takes you 3 hours a day to make. And in China, that might work well, but Americans are like, no, So if I just say it's in this bottle, it comes just as close to saying it's this pill. And then last, from my point of view, um, I have maximum, I am the ultimate bartender. Like, my apothecary has over 300 herbs in it from around the world, from most, over 50% from my gardens in the area, but stuff from South America, stuff from India, from China, from other parts of the country, maybe not from China, but they're from the Chinese thinking process.
Yeah,
Most of those plants,
we get
most of
nervous.
those plants are already growing here now. And so, that makes me and my apothecary able to blend anything. I can, so all those herbs I mentioned, I have, and most herbalists do have access to those sleep herbs that I just talked about, because it's such an issue, you know,
Yeah,
and a lot of
sleep
them
is
taste,
big.
and they double as anxiety herbs. So it's like they become usable in other areas because most herbs have more than one function. You know, like what was the one I mentioned earlier? One of them, let's see, like skullcap.
Uh-huh.
Skullcap is also working to normalize and relax the hypothalamus. And you know, from endocrine, nervous system, all of that, the hypothalamus is one of the most important organs in the body. It regulates temperature. It regulates, helps to regulate whether you're going to go down the amygdala react pathway or you're going to go down the hippocampus. This is just another day. The hypothalamus tells the pituitary what to do. Everybody says the pituitary is the master gland, but the pituitary is getting all the info from the hypothalamus, which is sitting with one foot in the endocrine system and one foot in the nervous system. It's like when you and I were in high school, I think the hypothalamus was in the endocrine system. Now, in today's anatomy and physiology books, they put it in the nervous system, when in fact, they should just put that as like a connector between those two chapters and say hypothalamus here on both sides, you know, and so these herbs are helping there. There are people that are just angry. From the Chinese point of view, they would say they have like liver and gallbladder constraint because anger and resentment is held in the liver. Maybe they just need to chill that out, because when the liver is angry, it just sends more blood up into this consciousness to stay awake. And if you can just tell them to release. So the Chinese would use white peony root. I would use that plus another herb right from your wheat, from the weedy part of your garden, cinquefoil, which if you don't know what it is, I guarantee if you walk in somebody's backyard near you, you're going to see it. It's everywhere. It looks like marijuana leaves, and they just run across your garden in little runners. Agrimony is another herb that can be used. I can go on and on just
Yeah,
for
I
this.
guess so. There's a lot of them, you know. That's quite amazing. You know, if somebody comes to you and say they are on treatment for Lyme, it could be an antibiotic, but they're really having a lot of trouble with the die-off component. How
Yeah.
can you help them?
Well, then we get in my approach to Lyme, I see it in three facets, especially if it's a chronic case of Lyme. If a person's getting it for the first time and there's none of the chronic symptoms going on because here it is bright and fresh, then two facets. And those two facets are in both. And one of them is there are many herbs, several herbs, that are directly antimicrobial against the Lyme bacteria, spirochete bacteria, plus the co-infections. There are also herbs that are helping the immune system to work better in their attack of that, right? So that's functionally similar to what an antibiotic would be, going after the organism. Facet two is keep the body clean. So you want to use what in the medical world would be lymphatic tonics. And again, in the herbal world, they are many. And these are the weediest ones of all. They're outside your door right now. Burdock root, dandelion root, yellow dock root, red clover blossoms, violet leaves. If you're growing echinacea, echinacea is a lymphatic cleanser. Elder has lymphatic cleansing properties. There's so many. This is the
Wow.
one. This
Yeah.
is one of the formulas I make where it's the most local. I don't leave my. I don't leave my neighborhood. There's one that's touted really highly called Red Root or New Jersey tea, and it's hard to identify. And I thought it wasn't around here. And a friend of mine showed me last year it's everywhere. So even that one's all over the place.
Wow. Do you go around to your neighbor's yard and dig up their weeds, and then they don't have to, you know, do any weed killing. They just have you there with your fork thing and you just pop it all up, right?
Yeah, at this point now, what I have is, well, I live in Wendell, so it's very rural. It's more even closer to wilderness than even just like farmy rural. And I've been there for 25 years and everybody knows me. So I don't have to call them anymore. They call me and saying, if you want that burdock root, I'm just about ready to dig up to put a garden and come and get it. And I'm like, I'll be over, in the next available time. And so that helps.
Oh,
Plus
that's cool.
we have gardens that we've been growing for close to 15 years down in Montague. I live in Wendell again. The it's like growing rocks there. It's not a place to be growing. But down in the valley of Montague, it's that Connecticut River Valley soil. It's very rich and fertile, and that's where we have our gardens. And then I have the eyes for it now. I go take people on herb walks. I look outside and I just see a medicine chest. Like right out the window behind the computer, there's cherry tree, there's pine, there's partridge berry. I can see it right there. There's like, I'm looking at about 50 species and about 15 of them are medicinal.
What about mushrooms?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Tell me about reishi.
Rishi.
Oh, it's reishi?
Rishi. Reishi.
Potato. Come on. Reishi,
Okay,
reishi.
let's call it Ganoderma, and then we'll be outside. No,
Oh, that
Rishi.
sounds more like a skin condition.
Well, that's right. If you've seen the reishi growing around on the hemlock trees, they grow here. There's a hemlock reishi that's native to the United States because hemlock trees are native to the United States. And when they're getting damaged or old, then the reishi, you'll see them growing, and they're that beautiful burgundy shellac. It's so shiny on top, and then the underside's pure white, and they're the shelf mushrooms. Um, that's the reason why they call it Ganoderma, because Gano means shiny and derma means skin, so it's shiny skin. So
So
the
what's,
Chinese,
yeah,
the Chinese, the
what did
Chinese
they
have their
find?
variety.
What did they find that, what does it work for? I mean, it's supposed to be very healthful,
So
but
let me,
it's kind of crazy how they figured this out.
well, the Chinese have been using it, their version of it, for 3,000 years. And because it's so amazing at what it does, when about 70 years ago or so, when this Russian medical researcher scientist started to study adaptogens or plant and mushroom medicines that really help to strengthen on this almost invisible level of everything getting better. One of the first medicines they studied was reishi, and so there's tons of information about what this mushroom can do. And it turns out that to one degree or another, all of the species of reishi, there's more than a half a dozen of them. Shiitake, which is also delicious in your soup. Maitake, also delicious in your soup. Cordyceps mushroom, lion's mane mushroom, turkey tail, that little fan one that's growing out all over the trees in the woods around here. At least those 7 or 8 are amazing medicines at deeply strengthening the immune system and also modulating the immune system. So instead of going right up to the surface and saying what's going on out here, they're going down to the deep reservoir and refilling that. The place, so I call that place the core. The Chinese would call it the Chinese, they wouldn't say the word Chinese, they would say the kidneys, the kidney yin, which is what the adrenals are sitting right on top of. But they say this endocrine core vitality bowl, mushrooms go there and fill it back up and help the entirety of the endocrine system and nervous system and immune system work stronger and therefore more balanced. Because hypofunctioning means you're getting sick all the time. And if you're in your nervous system, that means depression. But hyperfunctioning means autoimmune disease, allergies, and if it's your mental emotional system, it means hypervigilance and always being anxiety ridden. So here's the mushrooms coming in and working on that deep level. And not only that, anti-cancer, neuroregenerative, like lion's mane and reishi and cordyceps, help to protect and rebuild the brain and the nerves. So super essential in that third facet of my Lyme protocol for chronic people. Like those first two facets were anybody, right? Cleansing, clearing, all of those lymphatic herbs in that one. For the going after the organisms, they're all there. But for that third one, it's who's ever sitting in front of me.
Right,
But I
right.
guarantee you, in every single one of those protocol formulas that I make for them, a quarter of that formula at least is a mushroom blend,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's so amazing. And they really, unless a person has an allergic reaction towards that particular mushroom, there's no side effects. These side effects are pluses. Oh, it does this on the side. It helps to protect and rebuild your liver. Oh, it helps to calm your spirit and make you fall asleep better at night. Oh, it also helps with colitis. And you're like, wow, what doesn't it do? It's like, well, when it's working on those deep levels, then everything spins out of that. So it has direct and indirect benefits far down the line.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, I love mushrooms. If you're using your mushrooms like you said in your soup, are they still as potent, or do they have to be utilized in a tincture right from the root, right from
No.
picking?
Well, let's use the ones that are edible, because you wouldn't put you wouldn't put Rishi in your soup because it's wood,
No,
right? But
shiitake. I was thinking shiitake.
shiitake, the best way to have shiitake is for medicine, is to dry it or to buy it completely dried, and then reconstitute it right at the beginning of a long, slow soup stock. Like put them in even the night before, along with a couple of adaptogenic roots like astragalus, and you just let that cook, because the longer you let it cook on low heat, the more it starts pulling out the medicines. But the reason why it's good to have it dry is because the drying process really makes the cell walls more fragile. So then when you reheat it in the hot water, it just shatters those cell walls and the medicine comes out easier. Like a shiitake omelet with fresh shiitake, you're going to get all the nutrients, but a lot of those medicines are going to be harder to get at because it's a fresh mushroom and those cell walls are really rigid and tight. So
I
tasty, taste.
that's incredible. But now if you have your big dried mushroom and you're going to soak it, uh, do you have to chop it up or do
Well,
you
if
leave
it's a
it whole?
shiitake mushroom, if you've ever gone to a Whole Foods and you go to their bulk section, the dried shiitake buttons are they're only about that big.
Oh, okay.
So it's no problem. And then they're going to just like reconstitute and balloon up a little bit and get bigger. And so you could actually, but if they're really dry and you take a knife through them, they just start breaking apart really easy. So it's just a little experiment to decide how you want to do it. And
Yeah.
but if you were to just take the mushroom and dry it and then put it through your spice or coffee mill into a powder,
Hmm.
and then stir that powder in some water and drink it down, that wouldn't be as good as allowing the cooking process to draw it out for a while, because now you didn't really give it any chance, and now it's just the one day of digestion. So
That's
um
good to know. How do people find you? And do you do consults for people who are far away?
um okay, so how they find me first is by my website, which is clearpathherbals.com, all lowercase, www. And on there's my email, chris@clearpathherbals.com. And that's how people can contact me directly. Um, I'm in Western Mass, but I and my staff do phone and now Zoom. I mean, one of the upsides of this pandemic crisis is that we have this, I mean,
Yeah, we have
Zoom was
Zoom. It almost
Zoom was not
didn't.
on my event horizon a year ago.
It didn't almost work for us today, but whatever. We finally connected here.
Yeah. So there's that. And then also I encourage people, if they go to the website, join the contact list, because then it enables you to get information if you are interested in the education side, which now, because of Zoom, I'm actually able to reach people further away than the ones that were just coming in person a year ago. So, and there's a lot of articles. I'm
Right.
putting up articles all the time. There's some videos. So no
That's
matter what
great.
your interest, whether it's like, I really want to know about this herb,
Yeah.
or wow, I really want to hear him talk about how he harvests this plant, because he's got a video of him with his basket and his assistant and his lopping shears, and they're taking down this medicine and they're showing you how to, and he's talking about it. So there's all that.
Yeah.
So
You could have a show, for sure. That's great. Hey, do people come to you for their animals?
um, ooh.
Okay, we can't
So
talk
there's the
about
on the
that.
record and off the record. So
We'll just let that be. We'll just let that be.
the truth is, and I understand completely, that veterinarians are a territorial group, and I completely support and endorse them, because they go to school just as long or longer than human doctors. They have to learn about multiple species, sometimes like, as far away as a bird and a mammal, and they have to stay on top of it just as much. They have to pay just as much money, but they don't make nearly as much. When you walk in and say, save my dog, this is the love of my life, and they say, well, the bill is 800, you're like, what, are you crazy? And you're like, so they're a territorial lot. So when they start seeing people from outside of their system saying, oh, I can help your dogs and cats, they get pissed. and
Well, I'm going to
and
tell
they're my friends, so I know they gave me their lowdown decades ago, and I
you.
was like,
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah. Well, you know
But
what? In Belchertown, Dr. Kevin Landau is
yes,
a holistic vet,
yeah.
and he does well for himself. So you guys have to connect.
Well,
Have,
but that being said, if somebody, again, if it's my community, if it's Wendell, and if somebody calls me up from right down the road and says, my dog got into something, or he woke up this morning and it looks like he might have Lyme because he's in pain, he can't walk, or my cat needs some help with advanced aged kidney decline, I can help them out, because
because it's the
it's just my
local
it's my
people. It's your
neighbor.
family, it's your
Yeah.
family. Gosh, we've covered so much. Now we're going to be able to sleep. We're going to lower our stress. We're going to get our Lyme under control. I'm sure part of your protocol has cat's claw and Japanese knotweed, right?
I just started another company. We launched it a few weeks ago. The formula has been in existence for about 20 years. I've been tweaking it along the way. I call it Lymeaid, Lymeaid, and it's my antimicrobial formula. Japanese knotweed's in there, cat's claw, pau de arco, bital skullcap, andrographis, barberry, um, isatis, which is woad, really powerful, sweet Annie, um,
That's a lot.
sarsaparilla. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
really comprehensive. I'm pulling from what I learned from the West and Stephen Buhner,
Yep.
coupled with what I know from Chinese, and couple what I learned a long time ago about South American herbs being really helpful.
And it's
Uh,
strong enough.
oh, some people say that their lives have been, like, one of them said they couldn't walk. They were in bed for like a year and a half, and they started taking the formula. I give them a protocol. I say, do these other things along with it.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it happens this way with everybody, but the person, got back in touch and said, in 3 days I was out of bed, and in 3 weeks I was walking and working again. He says this was a miracle. And
Um,
so, but then
we're all looking for that miracle.
and then you get the people that say it's helping, and they're on a lifeline with it, but it's in themselves, and they can't quite get them to get out. And then if life becomes hard and they get bitten again or something, then it rears its
Yeah.
head up ugly. But that
Yeah.
third part of the protocol is the part. There's many medicines that help with adrenal, not just mushrooms. There's plenty of herbs, the whole adaptogenic world. It's probably the easiest place for me to operate. When you asked me over the phone a few weeks to is there herbs for adrenals? I was like, oh my God, there's even more of them than there are for the nervous system and sleep between the mushrooms and the herbs. And then there's for musculoskeletal joint support and relief and neurological protection. These are all the big major spots for Lyme, chronic fatigue, feeling really out of it, cognitively off, foggy brain, tremors and twitches and neuropathies. Whatever they send your way, this repertoire is vast, and a lot of these medicines are actually working in areas that our pharmaceutical industry don't have an answer to. It's not like it's better than their medicines. It's like they don't really go in that area. So they don't even have an answer there. It's more
Right.
like go eat broccoli or, go out and exercise. And it's like, well, the Chinese and Native Americans and these other cultures have been developing these medicines for precisely these reasons for thousands of years.
Yeah, and you know what? Our ancestors had it right, and not sure what happened, but certainly was taken over in a whole different direction. But I so thank you for coming
Sure.
on and sharing your wisdom, which
Oh
is
yeah, my pleasure.
it's
Nice to meet
huge.
you.
Yeah, yeah, we did get to talk, but now we got to see each other, so that's a really, really
Exactly.
nice. And certainly, I'll be in touch, which is, I think that all the things that you're doing, I can send just about everybody to you for one reason or another.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So
Well,
everybody, go ahead, go ahead.
just to let you know, I'm reducing my schedule a little bit right now because I'm went back to writing the book I've been wanting to write for a while, which is Chinese Herbs in North America. And that's why I've developed my staff, who are very well trained and also have full access to my apothecary and my counsel
Oh,
to be able
good.
to help. So even if they wanted me, they're gonna get the whole full thing anyway. And
Wonderful.
so
Well, that's
um,
good. See, there's got to be
there's got to be more, otherwise I burn out.
exactly, exactly. Well, that's
The thing about practitioners, who's taking care of them? We got to take care of each other.
yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah.
true. Well, listen, this has been another episode of Living with Lyme. And to understand and learn more about Chris Marano, you can check out his bio on the website. And certainly, please go to www.pursuewellness.us. See how I can help you. For everyone, this has been another episode of Living with Lyme. We're excited to give you the top information. If you have any questions or concerns, you can email me at livingwithlyme.ck@gmail.com. Everybody, be well. Take good care.